back to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, Josh Torres,
Hi, hello.
Adam Vitale,
Hello.
and Chaman Wu.
How's it going?
Yeah, James might have show up later. We assume he's sleeping, but we don't know. So we'll see if he checks in. But this podcast, we're recording it a little less than a week before Valentine's Day, obviously in early February. We're starting to have a lot of big games hit. We've got a lot of big reviews up on the site. The focus of this podcast is going to be on the first release that we had circled on our calendar for February. And that is, of course, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So obviously this game has been ramping up its marketing cycle for a while. We've been talking about gameplay and cinematic and, launch trailers for the last couple of weeks. The game's finally out. We've got a review up on the site. We've got, a Steam Deck ROG Ally impressions piece up on the site. We've got a few other things. But to lead off that discussion for us for this podcast recording, we're going to be turning the microphone over to Adam. And then after we go through that, we'll talk about a few other games that are slated to release within the next couple of days. Obviously, we've got a busy month ahead of us. A few new updates, a couple surprise release date announcements for February and March that we'll talk about, and we'll go from there. So how does that sound, Adam? We're going to be doing a lot of talking this episode about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. There's a lot of context around this discussion here. A lot to talk about. Obviously, a game that has been generally received pretty darn well. Seems like the zeitgeist is that it's an improvement of the first game. But to go to brass tacks, and we've talked about Kingdom Come Deliverance in a few different contexts over the last years, really, but over the last couple of weeks as I've played the original, and then you've gone into the sequel. So just kind of tee us up for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, what your impressions are, what you thought about it, and everything like that.
Yeah, so I think as this kind of series as this game has become a franchise, and people are more and more aware of it, I think some people don't realize that it kind of started out as a Kickstarter campaign more than a decade ago. Basically, it was Warhorse Studios at the time was like people who worked on like the Mafia games way back when, or more than 10 years ago, kind of forming a new studio to make a game 10 years ago. So this was in the era where Skyrim had just released. I think Inquisition was just about to come out, and Witcher 3 was basically in its marketing phases, where these guys, this unknown Czech studio called Warhorse, was like, we're going to make an open world RPG, but they called it Dungeons and No Dragons, so realistic, and that was kind of their hook. Like, this is a medieval European RPG, but no fantasy, no mythological creatures, no dragons. I'd argue there's no dungeons either. But that was kind of the initial selling.
That was a sales pitch.
Yeah, right. And there's a little bit of noise when it comes to how much they tout like stuff like historical accuracy and whatnot. But even still, I think the setting of these games is interesting because it's not, a setting that a lot of people are very familiar with. It's 15th century Bohemia, kind of in the times of the Holy Roman Empire. And I have like vague understanding of, the landscape of European societies at the time from like high school level history, but obviously I don't know all about really what happened in those time periods. And this game is not meant to be like a historical, retelling, but more just, a playground, taking those ideas and like, let's make a game around it. So the first game I played 6 years ago, was it 2018? 7 years ago? And it was impressive in ways, in terms of like, this is a true blue role-playing game. Everything is dictated by numbers. Things like all of your armors and all of your clothing have different stats for like its might, how much it affects your charisma, its wear and tear. Even stuff like food in your inventory has like a freshness number. There's a little bit of survival game elements to Kingdom Come Deliverance in terms of like you have a hunger meter, you have an energy meter, you have to sleep, you have to eat. And everything is dictated by numbers. So everything is sort of abstracted in these ways. In the original Kingdom Come Deliverance, I've said this before, and I said this in my original review. It is an RPG, and you kind of suck starting out. You play as Henry of Skalitz, who is basically the son of a blacksmith, and he finds himself in this larger conflict, but he doesn't know how to wield a sword. He's not very charismatic. He can barely steady a bow. He can't navigate conflicts or tense arguments. So you kind of have to work your way up. Yeah, he can't read. You have to work your way up. And you played this recently, and you talked about it briefly also. And so you have to remember that this is a role-playing game and not like an action game or like an adventure game. So like when you go to shoot your bow and arrow for the first time, your screen is just like wobbling all over the place because Henry sucks. He doesn't know what he's doing. And you there's this level of friction or abrasion to these games in that like it doesn't give it to you easy in terms of starting out. You have to work your way up. And the second game is similar. I'll just spoil it. I know we kind of talked about it like, well, what happens? Like, do you have to just start from zero again? Well, what happens is Henry falls off a cliff, and so he gets injured.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so you kind of have to. You don't start at zero again. I think the game starts you at like level 5 or 6 in a lot of your stats, but it's kind of a silly Metroid-ish, game argument. Like, all right,
I was actually gonna say,
I was
like,
thinking about
Ys
Ys.
for armor. Oh, yeah, my sword went off the side of the boat.
But it's also like a good way to like tutorialize like a lot of its basic systems. I imagine during that recovery period for Henry. Like, hey, here's how you play the and it of course like it does take into account that like unlike Henry in the first game, like where he told that he was basically starting at zero. Here he has some level of competency at like basic stuff now.
Yeah, like I said, you start at like level 5 or 6 in a lot of your stats. I said this game is dictated by numbers, and there are stats for everything. There are combat stats for like strength and agility and warfare and your different weapon types, and then there's stats for like speech and scholarship and survival and thievery. And so basically everything you do in these games is raising some meters somewhere. Everything is abstracted by numbers and meters. So as you're playing through this game, just by playing the game and doing things, you are leveling up. You have a main level, like for your character, Henry, but you're really managing like, I don't know, 24 different levels of different perks and abilities that you're getting. No skill tree or anything like that. It's just, every single component of the gameplay is basically under a meter of some sort. And for those who are maybe interested in this game but haven't played the original, I know Brian went the route of like, he just kind of blitzed through it, or by blitz through it I mean spend 80 hours on it or whatever you did. But this game does open up in a way where it tries to ease you into like what happened in the original game. There's dialogues and dream sequences and things like that, which even for someone like me is useful, having played the original game, as a refresher. Like, oh yeah, this is coming back to me. I recall this happening, and this is kind of where we left off 6-7 years ago. So to answer a hypothetical question, can you start with this game? I think the answer is yes. Obviously, you're never going to get the full context of anything unless you experience it for yourself. But I'm not a gatekeeper type player. If you want to start with this one, I think the game makes an effort to try to get you up to speed and kind of at least have the gist of, oh, here's what happened and here's what I'm doing. And since this game takes place in a whole new region of Bohemia anyway, like all the locations are new. You meet many, many, many new characters in this game, and in fact, some of the characters in the original game you don't meet at all. So it's kind of like new cast, new location anyway. Probably there's two things about Kingdom Come Deliverance that I really like. Kind of the role-playing density of everything. It's something that you don't see in a lot of games and even other Western RPGs. I say this in my review. I feel like a lot of RPGs do focus a lot on like combat and builds and skill trees and different, ways that you can min-max your character to mow down as many orcs as possible or whatever. But combat is only like a smaller portion of what you're actually doing in Kingdom Come Deliverance. There's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of exploration, there's a lot of events that really don't have much to do with, battling or fighting at all. It's running around, picking up items, talking to other characters, sneaking around, stealing maybe. And I think just that kind of balance to the game where you're mixing combat and dialogue and these sort of immersive sim or survival game elements. It's a really interesting, compelling mix of gameplay.
It gives them a lot of latitude for like, if you just go down to like, brass tacks, what can a quest, whatever, be in Kingdom Come? You might have a quest that doesn't involve dialogue or combat at all. Where some games like Veilguard, that's just an example. There's tons. Every quest has to frame itself around some conflict in terms of like you will have to fight something because that's the gameplay of the game. Where Kingdom Come has enough systems in play that you might have a quest that's just about convincing someone to give you some boots or whatever. Like, because there's those systems available for the quest designers to work with.
Yeah, it doesn't really follow a set pattern or framework. It's very much like it likes to give unique contexts as to like what your particular goal or like what you're aiming for at any given time, and it's very flexible, like how things may turn out too. And to bounce off of what you guys have said, like I think really what the charm is in Kingdom Come 1, and also I imagine what transfers over to Kingdom Come 2, is that the character interactions, conversations are really engaging because Henry is like your everyman, sort of nervous, kind of clumsy, and you see him like grow over time, like getting used to get better at like social situations along the way as the game progresses too. And it's just like it works because you can see a lot of like almost like yourself in Henry when growing up and trying to get better at like communicating what you want to get at.
He's also not like destined or in a special role. I mean, he kind of is in the fact that you have to kind of suspend your disbelief that he is incorporated into Raditz's retinue or whatever you call it, as quickly as he is. But other than that, he's just a guy. Like, he doesn't have any mandate. He doesn't have any like special consideration that makes him protagonist, dude. He just is.
Yeah, it's just really the voice talent for Henry, and usually and really the whole cast, but especially like Henry's voice actor, like does a really really good job just making that character really feel alive, especially all the little like nervous, like the nervous awkwardness of Henry at times, of trying to like get around like even like situations that like you manually respond to through dialogue choices that like seem outlandish. He finds a way to like kind of make it work and organically, and it's like that's really cool to see.
Yeah, so the story premise this time is so basically the overarching political situation that this region of the world find themselves in. This is 15th century Bohemia. The king, Charles IV, I think, has died, and his son, Wenceslas IV, I might get the numbers wrong, is supposedly the proper rightful king, but he is locked up by his half-brother, Sigismund, who's kind of basically invading and taking over the kingdom. And so there's this kind of split faction between supporters of Wenceslas, who is rotting in a dungeon somewhere, and Sigismund, who has kind of usurped the throne. And this is all mostly happening in the background, which is interesting because you get to see, like, you rarely ever see those two characters, the kings, in these games at all. You do a little bit, but you're really kind of seeing like how this conflict is basically kind of trickled down to just like the every peoples of this land. And you, at the beginning of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Henry and Hans Capon, who are basically the main two characters of the game, Hans Capon is a returning character from the first game, are basically sent to a castle Trotsky, which has its own lord. It's like the League of Lords. He's like one of the lords of the League of Lords, and basically trying to, engage in discourse with him to like, hey, we should support Wenceslas as the rightful king, and what can we do with Sigismund and whatnot. And basically Hans Capon, who is a noble, he is the Lord of Lipa. He is Hanish's nephew. There's a lot of like familial ties here, like who is who and where their social status and where they belong. And Henry is basically like his page or his bodyguard. He's not a noble, but he kind of just tags along. Whatever Hans Capon does, Henry tags along. But of course, while they're meant to deliver a letter, things don't go even close to how they're supposed to, and basically spirals out of control into the plot that becomes the game of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So during this whole sequence, starting out the game, like I mentioned, the game eases you into like who is who and what is what happened to Henry. And Henry has his own what's the word? Unfinished business, I guess, is what I'm saying. He's still trying to get his father's sword back. He's still trying to basically find the people who burnt down his hometown of Skalitz and whatnot. So he's not only just trying to, basically work on behalf of Hans Capon, but also like he has his own things he's trying to finish.
I have a question for you, Adam, like a very basic question before you go on. Obviously, we're not going to spoil anything like narrative-wise of what happens in this game, but the first Kingdom Come Deliverance ends off in a pretty, I'd say, almost cliffhanger-ish ending that was kind of cruel where it ended. Do you feel a sense of conclusion in Kingdom Come 2 when you were done with the main story?
It's definitely a stronger conclusion, although there is still room for further story should they have it, but it's not a cliffhanger like the original.
Okay.
So. But
I'm not sure if I'd call the original a cliffhanger, but it is definitely very open and like the main premise is unresolved. Yeah, it's kind of like a to be continued. Definitely,
it's not like a big exciting moment and then it cuts, but it's definitely like there were a lot of still unanswered things. By the end of the first game.
Brian, do you remember Father Godwin?
Yeah.
He's actually kind of like a main character this time around, and you even get to play as him a few times, which is kind of interesting. Weird. Yeah. So one thing that I think Kingdom Come Deliverance does pretty well with its character cast. So like in a lot of the framework of RPGs, like modern Western RPGs, you have like who are the companions? Like any BioWare game or Avowed coming up or Baldur's Gate or whatever, it's just like, oh, this character is a companion because they're a party member, and then they might have a whole, storyline and character growth and, personal story that you get to explore and whatnot. Kingdom Come Deliverance doesn't really have that because you don't have a party. And one thing that I actually find kind of surprising in these games is when you're going into it blind, sometimes it's hard to tell what characters end up being like really crucial and important to the plot and what characters are just like present as just like a side character. I don't know if I'm explaining this well. When you're playing a game like Baldur's Gate 3, you're like, oh, this guy is a companion, so I know they're important, right? Where in this game, like, there's a point in the game where you meet the leader of a group of bandits. His name is Jan Ziska. And these games have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of named characters. Some of them are important, some of them aren't. And some of them, are maybe only relevant for a quest and then that's it, which is fine. But like playing through these games, meeting this character named Jan Ziska, I just thought he was just another like quest character. And then I kind of realized like, oh, this character is actually like really relevant to the plot and sticks around and does a lot of things. And oh yeah, he's, by the way, on the key art. It took me a while to realize that he was on the key arts of the game. He's the one on the left. And I just think these games are actually kind of interesting in how these characters kind of weave in and out of the plot, out of like in front of Henry's, like, because everything is done by Henry's perspective, other than the few bits that are done by Godwin's perspective. But I just think it's kind of really interesting to see this really vast array of characters, and it doesn't all revolve around Henry. Well, it sort of does. But I think a lot of these other characters, they're not really part of your party, but are also crucially important to the plot. And I think there's this kind of balance and dynamic in how these characters work that is a little bit different than other RPGs.
Well, I'm thinking like
you have
Fantasy
a party.
15, where it's like if they were a generic NPC, they were like, their model was much less detailed, or their clothing was much more basic. And then you get the important characters are all like fancy and gussied up.
Yes.
Like, oh, they're an important character.
Yeah. So like,
and there's a lot of examples.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's kind of my point is like almost every character is compelling in their own way, whether or not they stick around for a long time or not. And that's the thing is going in blind, you actually kind of don't know who's going to stick around. And that's actually kind of interesting. I know it might be a weird way to frame it, but it kind of gives like a level of evenness to all the different characters in the game, where you don't know who's going to show up again. And it's not like you have like party members versus non-party members or whatever. They're just all characters. And I think that's interesting. I hope I'm making sense.
No, that makes sense. Like there's their importance to the world is not dictated by their importance to the story that happens to be told.
Or you're like you're in your party that tags along. Yeah, I get it. And I think we're close enough to the same page. But I was already pretty impressed with the first Kingdom Come Deliverance's like cinematic approach. I remember going into it thinking, okay, this is a Kickstarter game from a new studio. It's probably going to be a bit amateur, and probably not great production or whatnot. And maybe while it wasn't like top tier, maybe I was actually pretty impressed with the original game's like voice acting, just cinematic stylings, like literally just shot framing, lighting, things like that. I'm like, this is actually pretty good. And
I forgot it for a Kickstarter.
Yeah, for a Kickstarter game.
It does a lot. It does a lot of subtle things that don't. When you describe them in a podcast, it sounds boring. But when you see them in a game, you're like, "Wait, that's different." There's like a scene in Tomberg early on that stuck with me, where it's Henry and one of the nobles, Divish,
yeah.
speaking in a they're standing next to each other in like a kitchen, speaking to each other, and then like a maid character basically comes into the scene, walks between them to like the pot or stove behind them, and the camera kind of like deftly accounts for that. And it's one of those things where it's like so many games have your characters stand in a circle, shot, reverse shot, or whatever. I think Trails games from like 6 years ago, I think, are pretty bad at this, like the early Cold Steel
Tales,
and there's a lot of examples again. Final Fantasy Tales. And even like Inquisition, I think, like a lot of those late 2000s, early 2010s BioWare RPGs, kind of characters stand in a circle. They have BioWare face or whatever you want to call it, Bethesda face, and then when the scene's done, they're done. Where here, it's like characters are moving throughout the room between other characters. They're talking over their shoulder.
I actually specifically remember there are scenes with Divish in the original game where he's like sitting in a chair. And then, like, just during the dialogue conversation, he kind of like, he's an older man, and he kind of like lifts himself out of his chair just while he's talking, and he kind of puts his hand on like the cupboard next to him, kind of like wandering the room as he talks, and like just like interacting with the environment. And it's like not important stuff, and it's like it doesn't matter that he got out of the chair or whatever. It's just like it feels like they're actually conversing in a room that exists. And the camera will swing around in ways, like you said, that just kind of accounts for their positioning, and they're moving as they talk, not just standing in a circle. So yeah, it's stuff like that and some of the cinematic direction too that I think is just ratcheted up a lot in the second game. It's movie-like. I know people might scoff at terms like that, but I feel like they're very cognizant of this and trying to avoid the stand in a circle and talk, dialogue sorts of exchanges. So, and not only that, but I feel like a lot of cutscenes in games really focus on one of two things. Just like chains of dialogue, just every sentence is followed by another sentence, followed by another sentence, followed by another sentence. And also like, oh, this is an action scene, so this is just a bunch of fight choreography. And it could be cool. But I feel like Kingdom Come Deliverance, especially the second game, also knows when to let scenes just breathe a little and kind of showcase what's happening through silence and body language. Like, there are scenes that there can be, a whole minute between lines of dialogue when stuff is happening, but you don't need a character to, like, shout it out to you or explain it to you. And
narrate it.
Yeah. So, and I just think it does a really good job at that. And this is alongside, like, pretty interesting shot composition and lighting, and it's not just, close-ups of the character speaking all the time. It's not canned, like, oh, here's your aerial shot or here's your shot reverse shot, like you said. I think it's pretty cinematic, and I think it does a really good job.
It finds a really good balance between like wanting to be a movie and like actually letting you play the game.
Yeah,
there's a lot of games that kind of lean too far to like the cinematicness of the game, and like you feel like you barely got to play the game because they're so focused on crafting
very
these
scripted.
awesome, very scripted cutscenes, and it's like that's fine and everything, but it's like I wish I played more of the game because it seemed cool. But like Kingdom Come Deliverance, and it seems like the second one even does it to a better degree, where like you have the raw like time between like cutscene time and like amount of play. It's very much in favor of you playing that game and exploring it and at your own pace and doing what you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said earlier, everything in the game, it's open world, dictated by numbers. You're doing a bunch of different stuff. There's a bunch of different like mini games also in terms of like the immersion. The alchemy game is
like
back.
a dice mini game. The first,
the alchemy's back, the dice is back. There's now like actual blacksmithing where you can take a sword or a horseshoe or an axe, and like it gets kind of silly and fun where you literally put it in like a fire pit, heat it up so that it's red hot, glowing red hot, and hammer it a bit, cool it.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
It's actually what's actually kind of funny or fun is just like the other mini games in Kingdom Come Deliverance. You can mess up, and it gives you some tips on how to do it properly. And what's actually kind of fun is the hammering. When you're doing the hammering of the blacksmithing mini game, Henry will start whistling to himself, and the whistling is meant to be like help you keep your pace of when to hammer. But the tracks that he whistles are actually like the backing tracks of the game sometimes, which is just kind of this weird diegetic.
That's so. I love that attention to detail. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That's really, really cool.
I actually thought the blacksmithing was pretty fun. Alchemy, I actually didn't do a whole lot of because whenever I wanted like a potion, I just stole it from an alchemist or bought it. Like, I don't want to make this potion myself. I'm just gonna take it.
It's also interesting because as you mentioned in your review, like there is some consolidation in like your skills. So, like pickpocketing and lockpicking are now under the thievery skill, so it's like less minutia of like it's like less divvied up. Like everything feels more organic because they're more like sort of a category rather than like a specific skill category.
And I think there was herbalism and alchemy, and now it's just alchemy.
Herbalism and hunting is now survival.
Oh, and hunting. Oh, okay, that's what it was.
So in the original game, there was a stat tree dedicated to basically picking up herbs and weeds, and that's about it. And then there was another stat for like hunting and what you can do when you like kill a deer or a boar or whatnot. And they kind of combined those, so it makes it easier to manage because it's like before it's like I got to train out my herbalism, which I guess I just need to pick a bunch of weeds. But speaking of picking weeds, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with like the questing in this game. There's one quest where it's a side quest where you're trying to find the secret to like a vineyard's like recipe for their wine. And there's a couple of different options you could do to get it. You can just go in and just knock out the guards or kill them if you want and just steal it. You can sneak in quietly at night and maybe do some lockpicking past some guards, or maybe you can even do like stealth game sort of stuff where you like throw a rock and distract people or whatnot. Or you can do what I did, was you just get hired on as a vineyard like laborer, and you'll literally spend like 8 hours in game, which is, I don't know, half an hour real time picking weeds. That's just the quest. Is you just go around, you're just on the vineyard rocking around picking weeds.
I love that.
And then like the guy will actually be so like happy with your progress, potentially, if you do well. He was like, hey, go into the cellar and let's celebrate. Let's bring up this wine or whatever. And then while you're there, you can get the recipe for the wine you actually are trying to find for the quest. And so I just think it's cool stuff like that. There's also a main quest. I think some of you saw me streaming it, where you have to like navigate like a council by trying to speak Latin, and your character at that time is Godwin. You're not playing as Henry, and he can only speak Latin when he's drunk. So you're trying to navigate this dialogue, and you have to manage your level of drunkenness, where you're not too sober, but you're not too drunk. So
that reminds me that there was something that I was playing this for like at PAX last year, where during the speech interactions there was like different approaches to speech where like you're more persuasive or more brazen. Like, how does that like work in this game, and how did you feel about like
I don't remember exactly how it worked in the original game. I think the original game had like 3 different types of like persuasions you could do. There was like flirtiness, like smartness, like your scholarship, and maybe like how tough you were or whatever. Yeah. This game, it's similar. It's not exactly the same. The UI is a little different, but like you have like a stat that's your charisma stat, and it's like there's a charisma stat, there's a speech stat, there is like a toughness stat, and then
I'm pretty
few
sure
others.
In the first game it's charisma, speech, and I don't know what it is, but like toughness, it's like how imposing you are.
Yeah. I think so. That broadly returns, but like you'll actually, like when you're in a dialogue situation, and you had to choose a response. You might get like a response with like no symbol next to it, just a standard response. A response with like a book next to it, which is basically saying like this response is based on your scholarship. A response with like a mouth next to it, which is like this is based on your speech, and then like a response with like a heart next to it, which is like your charisma, which is a little bit different from your speech stat. And the game even tells you outright like none of these choices are necessarily better than the other, and some might not turn out in your favor. You kind of have to like keep in mind like who you're talking to and what they might respond to. And later in the game, you actually get a speech perk that will tell you like passing the charisma check against this character is really difficult, but passing the speech check on this character is actually very easy because maybe they're an idiot. I don't know, and you can fool them easily. Versus charisma, you have to have like super high charisma for to trick them or whatever. But starting out, before you have that perk, which is like a late game perk, you can't tell. So you kind of just have to just be aware and try to figure out how you want to persuade someone. And sometimes even just the regular choice is the best choice. And then there are sometimes, of course, choices that are tied to like, I did this other thing in this quest that gave me some context to something in this overall picture. Like, hey, I found this. There's a kind of a mini quest where you're dealing with a tanner, and you realize the tanner, if you like investigate his shed, you find that there's like trophy stuff there, like deer antlers and things like that. He's not supposed to have. He's a tanner. He's not a poacher. And then, like, if you talk to him later during this kind of mini quest, you can bring that up as long as you've seen it, and you can progress the dialogue that way, where it's not tied to a speech stat. It's tied to something else you did in the quest that you may not have, and it wasn't necessarily tied to like a icon on the map. It's just whether or not you found it or not. So sometimes you can progress through quests that way, where it's like you didn't pass a check. You happen to do something else that has context. But yeah, a lot of the game is dialogue. I mean, just like most RPGs, Western RPGs especially. But yeah, it's pretty versatile. And there are definitely situations where I charisma'd my way through a dialogue check, and there are definitely situations where I was just an asshole, and I was just like, do what I want or I'm going to hurt you. Whatever I felt like, or whatever seemed to be most appropriate in the time.
Like, well, sometimes in the original game, like the skills do complement each other. Like, if you're, or I don't know if compliment is the right word, but like if you're not that stealthy, but you're very imposing, you can just like eventually, once you've trained something up, steal stuff, and then when the guards stop you, you're like, "Well, what are you gonna do about it? Like, are you gonna fight me?" And they're like, "Oh, never mind. Go, have fun."
Sometimes it gets a little silly. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Or you're late in the game, kind of like the original game. By the end of the game, when your stats are so high, it kind of feels like you can do whatever you want, just because like I'm a really good swords person. I have a silver tongue. I can persuade my way out through anything or whatnot. And it's sort of fun because you had to work your way up to get to that point, right? I remember late in the game, I was in the city of Hinterberg, which is the biggest city in either one of these games, and I got caught lockpicking, like a shop door or whatever. And the guard is like, "Hey, stop! What are you doing?" There's this whole reputation system in this game where you can be like labeled as a criminal or whatnot. And I've even heard people talk about how like they've been branded a criminal and has like repercussions hours and hours and hours later. But anyways, I was caught lockpicking, and the guard is like, "What are you doing?" And my persuasion stat was so high that I could just basically tell him, "Oh, I wasn't lockpicking the lock. I was cleaning the lock with a cleaning tool that looks like a lockpick." And he's like, "Oh, well, carry on." So.
I don't Simpsons meme.
Hi, James. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I've been just sitting here waiting for a good moment to say something.
No worries. Yeah, no worries.
Were you raiding last night or something?
Something like that. I was only like 10 minutes late, but we were already talking. So,
okay. Well, welcome.
Yeah, no worries. But Adam, one thing I also was wondering from the first game, obviously a big component of the first game was like its realistic first-person combat system, which is an acquired taste. Some people never quite get it. That I kind of include me in that camp. Eventually, my stats kind of got high enough that my actual like player skill didn't matter as much. Like, has the combat been tweaked in any like big significant ways?
I feel like the combat was refined, but they didn't change it too much. I think they wanted to stick to their guns with the combat, and I don't mind it really. It's kind of claustrophobic. It's kind of unwieldy. it's pretty easy to get surrounded when you're in first person taking on a half dozen enemies. And unlike Assassin's Creed games, older Assassin's Creed games, enemies will attack you when you're locked onto someone else. So you have to be careful. But like, how do I put it? It's not flashy. It's not highly choreographed. You're not going to be dazzling your foes with skills of finesse and grace. You're just trying to wear them out before you're trying to wear them out before they wear you out. There's a stamina system. You have to block. You know when to swing, know when to block. There's a counter system. There are some kind of basic combos you can do if you swing your weapons in the right way. Which I did. I found a couple of combos that I kind of stuck with that were sometimes effective, sometimes not. But I don't know. Like I'm fine with the combat. It's not like the strength of the game, but it's also not really
it's not overhauled.
I would say it's refined. It's not overhauled. It's more or less similar to how it was in the first game. I think there's like less angles to attack from with your sword, so, to try to make it a little bit simpler. It's like up, left, right, down, versus like upper left, upper bottom left, whatever. So I think they try to make it a little bit simpler, and I think the counter system is a little bit more lenient this time around. I'm going by memory here, but otherwise, it's fine. I'm not going to say you should play Kingdom Come Deliverance because it has really engrossing combat, but I think it's suitable. So.
And I think it actually, at least from the first game, it does really well, at least for me. Again, might be skill issue, but even once I was like really good that I could defeat anyone one-on-one with no problem, because the enemies don't give you any grace. If there's 3 of them, all 3 will attack you from all available vantages at the same time. Like as soon as there were 3 or more people fighting me, everything, like, you have to be careful. Like even if your stats are really high, it's like, oh, but if a guy's gonna hit me in the back, I'm gonna start bleeding, and then I'm gonna move a lot slower, and it's not a good time. So it's one of those things where even if you're not that stealthy, if you can take out a guard or 2, separate from the main, I'm just gonna go in swinging my sword, it helps a hell of a lot. So it's not again, not flashy, but just very much kind of, it feels appropriate for the time period. At least from a layman's perspective.
To your point, I was streaming the game not too long ago, earlier this week, and I had like a late game, end game character, and I was going into like an enemy camp, and they had like a chest that they were guarding, and I saw like 3 enemies, and I was like, okay, I can take on 3 enemies, so I just started fighting, and then all of a sudden like 3 more guys showed up. I'm like, oh shit, there's 6 of them now, and I actually got hit a few times, and I'm like, fuck, oh, no. I have to run, and I just start running. I think Mikhail was watching me at the time, site contributor, and I'm just running across this giant field, bloody, with like 6 guys following me, and like I'm a high level character, if it was just 3 of them, I promise you I could have taken them on, but when I'm outnumbered 6-1, I'm like, nope, this isn't gonna work. And I'm like literally
because they do not give you any grace. They don't wait their turn to swing their sword. They're all on you, like locusts on whatever locusts go on.
They do wait a little bit, but still, I found it best to run. I know when to run, and then I went back, and I was like, I don't need to fight these guys, and I just snuck in and stole the stuff from the chest, which was worthless anyway. It might not be worthless, I don't remember, but like I knew that not worth trying to fight these dudes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if like with the second game, like they added like more weapon types as well, right? Like
yeah, there's pole arms now. I don't quite remember exactly what was in the first game, but
they had halberds.
Oh, there's halberds. So I didn't remember if those were new or not. I didn't use them in the first game. I just don't remember if they were there.
Well, I played obviously like the gold edition of the first game, so like I had like Houndmaster and other things that might have been added later, sort of thing. So I don't know if weapon types were something that dropped in later for the first game.
Yeah, but there's swords, there's like axes and hammers, which are heavy weapons, and there's halberds, and then there's unarmed fighting. I think that's it. Oh yeah, there's also for the marksmanship skills, there's your bow and arrow, there's crossbows, and there's also like pistols now, like old-fashioned 15th century guns. They have like absolutely terrible aim, and I couldn't really figure them out. Like they take too long to load and whatnot, and maybe you can find a use for them, but I like, no, this isn't working for me. I'm not going to. But there are there's gunpowder now, and there's a few quests and scenes that involve it.
Oh, okay.
What else? It's a long game.
Yeah.
I spent more than 100 hours on it, Now, I think I've seen some reviewers say they beat it in 50, which is not short, but like it is an open world game, so there's a lot to do off the main critical path. Quite a lot. You know how the first game had like one relatively sizable world map, not a huge world map, but had one map. This game has two, and I think the second one is bigger than the first one, so it's roughly twice the size, let's just say, of the first game in terms of just like map area. And it's a pretty lengthy story too. Like there's actually quite a lot that happens from start to finish. I mean, by the time I got to the end of the game, I was like, man, that stuff that happened at the onset of the game kind of felt like a lifetime ago almost, because there's just a lot of stuff that goes down from start to finish in that game to Henry and all the other characters that you meet. I do think the game also improves in a couple of other ways. So in terms of its portrayal of other characters, in the first game, do you remember the Cumans, Brian, in the first game?
I mean, they're basically the generic enemy faction.
Yeah, they're just kind of like this faceless invader tribe. And that got some flack because they were just like foreign outsiders, blanket evil, just unknown entity, faceless people. Like literally faceless because they wear masks sometimes, or most of the time. There's a couple of quests early on in this game that actually tries to humanize them a little bit. Not necessarily like, whitewash, or how do I put this? Yeah. Like some of the stuff that some of the evil characters do in the game. It's not trying to diminish that or whatever, but it's like, hey, maybe these guys shouldn't just be faceless foreign adversaries that are just evil all the time. So you do get to meet kind of a band of them, and there's a few that you kind of figure out where they're from, and they have like their own little backstory. They're just a minor character. You can actually start drinking with them. It's kind of humorous. And it just kind of gives them a little bit of context. Like, okay, here's what these characters are, what they're doing, and how they try to fit into this larger conflict of Sigismund versus Wenceslas. So they're there in this game.
Yeah, and in the original game, and my limited knowledge of like Central and Eastern European medieval history is going to show here. But if I remember right, Sigismund is trying to like impose his will in this area by basically contracting out the Cumans, who are like Eastern Visigoths or something. They're like Turks, from a more Germanic tribe from further east. Mm-hmm. And basically they're just kind of like the grunts for Sigismund. They're an external force. They're all here just to basically be adversarial. And that's kind of all you ever really need to know about them.
And I think it feels to me, now I am not the best person to like talk about what is proper medieval history, but it feels to me they Warhorse Studios heard some of the criticisms about how these characters were portrayed and gave them a little bit of context and humanity. Some of them are still evil, just by the nature of being an invading force working under a villainous character, but they're not just blanket, faceless enemies anymore. Also, female characters. In the original game, I said this in my original review, I kind of felt like every important female character in the original game was kind of there mostly as a sexual object for Henry first and like a character second. I remember the original game was actually kind of off-putting to me, where you do a quest with a female character, it basically ends in romance, and then after that, they just kind of revert back to their stock like dialogue. As if like, yep, that's it. That's the whole point of the character, was to romance them, and doesn't even go anywhere after that. In this game, I do think it's a little bit better. There are two main female characters in the game, Catherine and later on Rosa, and I feel like they have a bit more agency in how they are portrayed, how other characters behave towards them. Now, there is still a little bit of depiction of like male chauvinism towards some of the female characters, but usually by characters in the game that you're not meant to be sympathetic towards anyway. I don't think it's perfect. I actually have quite a few issues with it that I maybe don't want to get into because it gets a little bit into the weeds, but I do think it's an improvement on the first game, how the female characters are treated. Like, for example, Catherine, she works a lot with that Jan Ziska person I mentioned earlier, and he basically treats her like he trusts her. He trusts her to do, like, she's kind of like an informant, femme fatale, resourceful type character working for this band of kind of vigilantes, and there's this, I feel like the relationship between her and her like commanding officer is one purely of like respect and like I can trust her to get stuff done, which was not something I felt about any character, any female character in the original game. And then like I think Rosa, who is a noble lady you meet later in the game, she's like spirited and she will speak up, and I feel like she inserts herself with agency into the story, which is kind of refreshing compared to a lot of female characters, especially in the first game. So I do think an improvement, although I do have some issues with it. Also, if you followed any of the noise around this game, there actually are a few male romance options in the game, and I'll just say it: you can have Henry kiss Hans Capon eventually in the game.
I mean,
which honestly,
when they said there was a romance option, I'm just like, I assume one is Hans.
Yeah, like it's not that surprising, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, the worst corner of the fan base is upset at this. Now, I don't want to make this a bigger deal than this is, but like, it's a role-playing game. I didn't have Henry romance Hans Capon, not because I'm like against the idea of it. I was just like, no, I just want to keep them as sort of these like liegely brothers, and that's just how I wanted to view it. And it's like you get the option to kiss Hans at one point in the game. Maybe you might have to like, I don't know, raise his reputation enough to even get that option. I don't know, but it is a role-playing game. It gives you the option, and you don't have to take it. That's it.
Yeah.
Shock.
Yeah, it takes 3 seconds out of a 100-hour game. No big deal.
Not a big deal. Yeah.
And like, if you want to do it, go for it. I think IGN posted like, here's how you do it if you want to do it. And there's a couple of other male romance options too. They're not as important of characters. Han is basically like the second protagonist of the game, really, and he was pretty important in the first game also. But yeah, the fact that they included that option in the game is fair, and why not fun? Why not? Like, I have no issue with it whatsoever. But it's unfortunate that it's unfortunate that the director of this game took a lawnmower to his social feeds and basically pissed off everyone. But I don't know how much you want to get into that, but it's a role-playing game. You don't have to do it.
Well, just talking about characters, since you've talked about Hans, you've talked about Rosa, and I'm forgetting the other lady's name, the Femme Fatale. Yeah, the also in the same vein about characters being introduced, there is a character that is from I don't know if they're from Africa or like from Mali. Okay, and like how do you feel about that character being integrated? Just like,
okay, yeah. So Mali is northern Africa, right? Yeah. So one of the locations in this game is Sigismund's camp near Gutenberg. It's like a big army camp, and you get into that camp even though Sigismund is like the enemy. It's like a camp of wanderers, Germanic tribes. The Cumans are there. Sigismund's people. You get into that camp because you're like, I'm a blacksmith and I'm supposed to be here. I've been hired on as a blacksmith. And they're like, oh, okay. So you can wander around this camp. And one of the characters you meet in this camp is Musa of Mali, is how he's referred to in the game. He's the only black character in the game, as far as I'm aware. Of course, certain people are upset that there's a black character in this game. The context behind this is that for the original game, when it was criticized by people for being kind of uniformly white with no diversity, the director kind of shouted out, like the loudmouth he is, saying there are no black people in Bohemia. And now that the second game does have a black character in it, people are turning his words against him, which I kind of get, but also they're all just it's just a bunch of noise. But yeah, there's one black character in the game. His name is Musa, and he's a traveler, and that's why he finds himself in this camp, and he's also a healer. And when you talk to him, he talks about like his experiences traveling and some of the different places he's been, and he now finds himself in Bohemia, and he's a healer, and he's portrayed to me as like a competent, knowledgeable healer. He knows a few things that are unusual to Bohemia because he's not from there, but I think the game does a pretty good job like portraying him as not like a whack or like, look at all this strange stuff he's doing. He's just like knowledgeable to me. Now, I'm a white person. I don't have the lived experience of a person of color. I will never have that experience. So I don't have that, perspective. And I can't have that perspective. But to me, seeing how Henry interacts with him, Henry's a little bit like surprised at first. Like, wait, where are you from? You don't look like me. He doesn't say that directly, but effectively. But I think Henry does a kind of a remarkable job kind of taking things that are unusual to him and customs or traits that are unusual to him and meeting them at the level. In terms like, oh, okay, this is not what I'm used to, but I accept it. This isn't here or there, but there's also a Romani tribe in the game early on that also has customs and words and, you know, things that are unusual to Henry, but he just, at least the way I roleplayed as him, wanted to, you know, engage with these people that were different from him. And I think the game, from my perspective, portrays that fairly well. Musa does make some jokes.
It sounds like they substantiated it just fine.
Musa does make some jokes how like something like a single banquet back where I'm from has more spice than all of Bohemia. Kind of a joke that these people don't know how to spice their food, which I don't know. Some people might take that as an insult. I don't know. But
that's as tame as you can get.
Yeah, exactly. But, yeah. Right. And he also makes kind of a joke like where I'm from, women don't wear as much clothes as they do here because it's hotter or whatever. And he's, you know, it's a little bit off color, but it's also like doesn't seem totally outlandish. Like, oh yeah, he's from the equator area of Africa, right? In the hot desert jungle, or, you know, I think he's from Northern Africa, which is a bit hotter than Bohemia. But anyways, like, he's involved in a quest line where there's a murder in the camp, and there's a portrayal that, like, other characters in the camp are like, the outsider did it, of course he did it, he's strange and weird. And you, as Henry, get the chance to defend him, and he's clearly, obviously, not the culprit. And there's a quest where you basically find who the real culprit is, and you do form a camaraderie with Musa, and he actually does come back later in the story in some key moments. Not as like a major figure, but a pretty significant figure. But to me, like, I think I'm a pretty optimistic person. To me, I don't think most people will bat an eye that one character out of the hundreds of characters in this game happens to be black. Like,
I think,
you know,
I think the vast majority will be like, okay, cool.
Yeah, like, who cares? Like, it's interesting. I don't want to diminish, like, I don't want to just say, oh, it doesn't matter that he's black, because it does. It brings to that's his perspective and whatnot. But it's interesting that he's there, and he's just one character of several, right? Many. There's lots of characters in this game.
You already kind of talked about how, like, as you meet a character in this game, you don't really know if they're going to be important or not. This character seems like he's maybe, you know, middle of the pack, important in the quest, and comes in a bit later, but there are characters more important than him, and there are characters that are less important than him, and he's just another one of several, based on your description, several well-realized characters, and he happens to be one of them. Like,
right,
there you go.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, one thing about this game that's actually also pretty impressive to me, I don't know why I thought of this just now. Do you remember in, like, the more recent, like, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I don't know if you expected me to say that, a lot of the NPCs in that game will comment on what Link is wearing, different outfits or whatnot. There's like a bunch of, like, just dialogue that will just, random characters will just comment on, like, your outfit or if you're not wearing anything or whatnot. Kingdom Come does that too, and it's even more impressive in ways because it's all voiced. There's actually a lot of times in this game I'm speaking to a character for a side quest, or even just like a shopkeeper or a mini event or what have you, and all these characters, a lot of them do have, like, different voices, and, like, you know, there's, like I said, there's hundreds of characters in this game, and there is a handful of times, more than that really, where I'm talking to a character and they're just talking about their shop or their quest or an event or whatever, and then they'll actually end the dialogue like, God save you, Henry, by the way, take a bath, did you sleep in a barn or whatever? And, like, oh, I guess I'm dirty. Or, like, they'll talk about, like, geez, were you in a fight? There's blood all over you. Or if you're wearing, like, rags, they're like, what are you wearing? Or if you have, like, a really crappy horse, like, geez, that's the ugliest horse I've ever seen. Or if you have a really nice horse, they're like, wow, that horse probably costs more than my farm.
Everyone's a critic.
Or they'll say, like, that horse costs more than my farm. My point is, there's just kind of a lot of just spontaneous dialogue voiced by all these different characters, just kind of, like, interacting or reacting to, like, your character.
That's awesome.
Like, I'm just kind of trying to imagine, like, all the voice acting that this game had to go through, and, like, every single voice actor, even whether they're a bit part or a main character or whatnot, like, they added all these voice lines for What if Henry talks to this character and he's dirty, or he's wearing rags, or he's not wearing any clothes, or he's bloody, or he's drunk, or things like that? And it's not even like canned lines. Like sometimes they'll say like, did you sleep in a barn, or did you play in a pit, or whatever. Like there's different ways they phrase this. None of this like matters. It's just kind of a part of that, like as that sort of believable, interaction with what you do in the game is reacted to by the characters within it.
Add up, especially for like an immersive experience like this. Like just having like a mountain of small details really sells you the believability that you actually like live and breathe in this world. It feels makes the game more alive. That's really awesome. I have a question for you because this was something that was definitely well documented at the original launch of Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, where that game was a mess, a technical mess, bug ridden. It took years to get it up to speed. What's the technical performance from your end when you were playing this?
It's much better. Like the reason why I haven't really talked about bugs is that it's much, much, much cleaner than the original game. In fact, when I reviewed the original game, I played it before launch, so this is like the buggiest version possible.
Yeah.
I actually ended up reviewing it like a month after it came out because there were just so many things in that game that were just like broken. I remember there's a point in the game where you're supposed to talk to Radzig, who's the main character, like continue on with the story, but it didn't work for me. And I was just like, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? Like, I don't get it. Like, I felt dumb, as if like, how am I supposed to actually progress the game? And it was like, oh, it's not just me. The game is broken. And I actually had to like reload a save and get back to that point again. And then it worked. And then there were quest lines where a character was supposed to do something, but they didn't, or whatnot. And it was pretty severe. Like it wasn't just a handful of issues. It was dozens and dozens of issues all over the place. This game, not so much, although I did run into a few bugs. One, I'm doing like an archery, or I'm doing like a tournament. Like it's like a not jousting, it's like a dueling tournament, right? And it's a quest, and you spend a lot of time like sitting in the corner of the ring waiting for your like adversary to show up. And while the tournament Bark or whatever he is that's saying like who versus who and here's what's going on is like introducing the other character, and then the other character, I don't know, maybe for some reason he didn't spawn in the right place and had to walk from a mile away, but it took him like in-game hours to like get to the pen. Like I'm just sitting there waiting for my adversary. Nobody's moving, nobody's doing anything. I'm not even allowed to leave the pen, but like there's some event where the character is, I'm assuming what was happening, he was walking his way to the pen and he was supposed to be a lot closer than he was. So I don't know. There was some weirdness there that I had to wait for hours in game. I literally did like there's a time skip option in the game where you can wait just standing there. And I did that a few times and eventually he showed up. Like, I don't think that's how it was supposed to work. Also, there was like a couple of cutscenes in this game. A lot of the cutscenes in this game are actually like real-time rendered. And it's pretty impressive. But there were I think 2 different cutscenes where an NPC spawned in the middle of the cutscene and they weren't supposed to be there. And so like I'd have a cutscene with some guy just standing in the middle of the scene and he's just not doing anything. Just standing there. I wonder, did I take a picture of this? I wonder.
It really speaks to like the strength of them, like like their decision to stick with the same engine as Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, but like just an updated version of it. And so they have like years and years of experience of like optimizing the engine and working on it. And they didn't have to like, they didn't pivot to like, hey, let's go Unreal Engine 5 or something and start from scratch again.
Yeah, this is CryEngine.
Over the last like 2 years, it feels like nobody likes Unreal Engine. Nobody.
This is CryEngine, which is an older engine, but also means I didn't run it into like stutter issues.
Yeah, and because like you said, it's less bug ridden, less like technical hiccups and things, because they basically learned from like the first game of like, okay, we have all this background knowledge that we can still apply. So like any previous issues that people might have run across, we can account for it now because we're still working on a very familiar framework, just an updated version of it. So and from like what people have been saying through reviews and Steam reviews and general feedback about the game, it's like, yeah, people are really impressed. Like, thank God that like it's a game that like, just feels optimized at day one, you know. That's the state of things.
I just posted an image in our chat, our discussion chat, that listeners won't be able to see. It's a dark scene, but the same character showed up in the scene twice. One was like his cutscene like model, and one was just like his NPC model just standing there. Like, I don't think that's how
So
it's
he's supposed
to
to
work.
be like so Zen's like obviously one's supposed to replace the other, but whatever flag didn't get applied correctly.
Right.
So obviously I don't want to place too much importance on your review score, because we know that the score, like, we write the review and then we think, what number do we want to slap on it? This, I suppose. And obviously there's more thought to it than that. But you scored this an 8. And I know that's, obviously what you've discussed over the last hour is much more representative of your thoughts on the game than a single number could ever hope to summarize accurately. But based on that, I was just curious, like, what are the drawbacks, or what are the things that aren't quite fully as realized? Because you've been pretty much very positive for the last hour, but I don't know if there's anything where the game does potentially come up short, or maybe isn't implemented quite in a way that you enjoyed to the fullest.
I feel like there is a little bit of a disconnect, between like the open world exploration kind of questing sort of gameplay, and then there are pretty lengthy scenes where you are on rails for a bit, where, like, for example, early on in the game, you go to a wedding. You're trying to meet a lord, and he's going to be at a wedding, so you try to figure out your way to get into this wedding. And then, like, once you get into this wedding, it's literally like hours and hours and hours of like events and scenes, and kind of, it is more of that railroaded, scripted gameplay in those moments before you kind of like get access to the open world again. It's still enjoyable and fun, and like I said, the cutscene direction that you're running into during those scenes is really good and compelling. But I kind of wish there was a little bit better integration between like the exploring the world questing gameplay and then like the storyline. It just feels like there's a little bit of a divorce between, like, all right, this, now I'm caught up in this kind of linear-ish sequence of story and scripted events, and then eventually hours later I'll get kind of shunted back to the world. And I kind of feel like the first game actually was maybe a little bit better at like this, when you're doing story, it kind of takes place within the world versus divorced from the world. But this is a minor criticism, but it is something I kind of felt like there's a little bit, I wish it was a little bit of a smoother, like, and I guess blending of those two things. And then also, there are some parts about the story I kind of feel like it's a long game, and I kind of feel like there actually are some parts that maybe are like repetitive and maybe overlong, and like, I don't think this section of the game necessarily needed to be here in this way. I kind of felt like maybe less would have been more at this particular point. So there are some points where I kind of, there's, for example, there's a handful of points where you have to like sneak around a castle at night, and I kind of feel like I already did this. I'm just kind of like doing this thing again. But still, more minor criticisms, things like that. And, like I said, combat wasn't necessarily the best. I think it's okay. I think it's suitable, but it's not necessarily, a strength of the game. But yeah, I gave it an 8, which is, it's a score. I'm really positive on the game. It's a certain type of RPG. I know some people, when they review this game or they play this game, they're not a fan of, the more survival-ish elements. I saw someone online basically saying they were upset that they had like no money, and they felt like there was no way to get money, and they kind of felt like it was way too restrictive. And I think that's kind of the part of the point of the game, is that you kind of have to work within your means and what you got. It's not just going to give it to you. But, there are points like that where I kind of feel like there's an appeal to certain people that this game will have that other people may not see that. It's not trying to be a broadly appeal, everyone will love this sort of game, I think. But clearly, based on its just general reception, it's done really well. Like, I think it's got a Metacritic of high 80s, and Metacritic is not the end-all be-all. I know that. I'm just trying to use it as a very, very general overview of what the reception seems to be.
Finger on the pulse.
Exactly. Just at a glance, broad perception of the game seems to be pretty damn positive.
And reached like, about over 230 concurrent on Steam, 230K.
Yeah, and they've also announced that the game has sold 1 million copies.
They've also announced that they've made their money back already.
Yeah, and that's like we said, 7 years of development. So obviously, just good for the studio's health to be able to know that they've going to be able to sustain themselves with the the support of this game that it's gotten
yeah,
so
I
far.
feel more confident now that like whenever I find time to like play a new game, like they pick this up earlier than like maybe it's post game updates because it feels like out of the gate it feels like hey, it's not as bug ridden, it's pretty optimized, and it feels fully complete. Because I know I said when they were talking about their post launch updates and whatnot, I'm like, I don't know, this feels like this feels like a wait and see, but now it's just like oh okay, it seems to be really really good out of the gate. There's no like, hey, wait X months for it to be playable. It's like, yeah, no, it's out of good state right now.
So obviously we have, if you want to read more about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Adam's got his review up on the site, rpgsite.net. We also have the Steam Deck ROG Ally feature from Mikhail up on the site. And I don't know, like when I heard, this, like maybe it's my impression of the first game not running very well at launch. Like I wasn't expecting it to be like a game that I would see people suggest to play on a portable PC. But Mikhail says it runs fine on Steam Deck and better on ROG Ally. So definitely a playable version, way to play those games.
Yeah, it's very
Uh,
impressive. I think that's really just the power of like, hey, they really optimized the fuck out of CryEngine and made it sing on portable
Mhm.
devices.
And then, of course, sold over 1 million copies. So, congrats to the studio for a successful launch.
I
Yeah.
haven't heard the word CryEngine in so long. Is this like one of the main games that use CryEngine still, or is there
Yeah,
other playing?
the still uses CryEngine like the first game. It's just an updated version of it, but they just kept at it instead of like bringing it over to a new engine entirely. They're like, hey, they're sticking to their guns basically. I'm like, well, we know we're gonna work with what we know. How they have had years of development of CryEngine.
That's
And
crazy.
really,
I haven't heard that word since Aeon. It's like CryEngine. It's like what? It's
yeah,
like everything just moved to Unreal. It's like
and even then,
Yeah,
like it still looks pretty impressive too. It's no slouch on the graphics front as well. Like it's so.
I was trying to find other games that are CryEngine, and the only semi-recent-ish one that I can see listed on like Wikipedia is 2017's Prey, which had been like same
Oh
time
yeah!
frame
Wow.
as the original Kingdom Come Deliverance. But yeah, I mean, good on them to iterate on what they knew. The institutional knowledge. They've worked with the engine on one game. They're able to iterate on that and kind of flex it a little bit to the needs of the second game, rather than throwing it out, with the bathwater and saying, well, we got to go to Unreal Engine because that's what new developers are learning. Like, no, we found something that is suitable for our needs and we're going to iterate on it. So it seems like a smart decision that's paid off.
I gotta just like eat crow because I remember years ago I was like kind of giving like Falcom shit for not using Unreal Engine, and now it's like looking at the current state of their engine and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, it's like okay, maybe that was the right move of theirs.
Yeah. Maybe we were wrong about the Unreal Engine future, and we just don't know anything.
Critical support for any developers that want to stay far away from Unreal Engine.
Before we go into news, another review like embargo that released in the last week is the review for the upcoming Trails Through Daybreak 2, which is coming out on, let me remind me that date, February 14th, on Valentine's Day. Yeah. So within a week of us recording this, but it actually had an embargo that come up, just a couple days ago. So embargo a week before release. So as with a lot of Trails games we discussed here on this podcast, Chow, Josh, and James have played these games along the Japanese original release. I've been keeping up with the English releases, but I did not have early access for Daybreak 2, so I've not played this, though it is on my
I actually do
calendar.
have early access to it in some other forms.
Oh, for the English version? For
Yes,
guide purposes?
yes.
But you played the original when it launched,
Yeah.
right?
I wasn't really big into it. In fact, I think I just dropped the game when around Act 3 came out.
Well, I was gonna say, like, we kind of discussed this back. I'm sure you could pull up a 2020, what is it, 2022 podcast, where this game first launched in Japan. Because that's right, because it was this, and then it was East 10, and then 2024 it was Kai no Kaseki. So we kind of already discussed it at that point, but so let me stop bearing the lead. Scott White, who has been kind of covering a lot of the English releases for us for the Trail series, has put his review up on RPGsite.net, and he was actually pretty positive on the game. Though I having not experienced the game myself, I know that when we discussed it when it released in 2022, saying that it felt a lot more like a filler entry, or I don't know. Filler is kind of a loaded term.
I guess I'll provide context here. I think
Right.
I don't know because historically James covered Trails for us for a while, and then I think I don't know if it started at Daybreak 1 where we decided Scott, since a new arc, he'll.
What happened is that we have a thing where we don't really do import reviews anymore, but because I do my like unscored like impressions or basically reviews. We don't want to have the same person that did like an import impressions do the review itself. And quite frankly, with how long those games are, I'm not replaying them. So he's the one that kind of stepped up and said that he wanted to cover the English releases. So I mean, all power to him. So
yeah. So I mean, Scott is a lot more, I guess, up on Daybreak 2 than most people. I mean, there's definitely the fans of Daybreak 2, and Kuro 2 when it originally released. I personally have already stated what I felt about Daybreak 2 for the most part when it released here, and that has mostly kept up. Of like, I do not like this game. I think this game suffers from the almost like the Gundam Seed Destiny problem of like it has a really strong like first half ish. And then it completely falls apart. It completely falls apart the last third of it. So, and I can't really even spoil like if I went into why, it would spoil it. So I can't really get into that.
And it's worth noting that even like internally, Scott has said similar things where it's like he pretty much said the same thing I did when I finished it earlier, like last year. Finally, I was like, this one late game section isn't even really bad, but man, it's like way longer than it should be.
I mean, I can't say anything because I'll spoil the game unintentionally. That's the thing. And there's a lot of things about Daybreak 2, especially that's last third, that I do not enjoy. Especially when you're like to lay out like exactly like, okay, what actually happened in this game that's relevant, and it's like
nothing.
And I know people out there will say, well, Kai retroactively, makes Daybreak 2 a little bit better. It's like for me, that's a little bit cope, but I can kind of see where they're coming from. Because there are things in Kai that definitely reference Daybreak 2 directly, but it's kind of very stupid in the way that it does it. I wouldn't say it's the most elegant, narratively speaking. But if I were to elaborate on that, that's once again spoiler.
Yeah, and
I can't say anything.
And to be clear, I actually am one of those people that thinks that Kai does retroactively make Daybreak 2 better. So
I mean, with all of this said about retroactively or not, or English release, Japanese release, like we don't want opinions to be aligned all the time. That's uninteresting. Adam had a Blue Sky tweet. Like, we don't want people to just all feel the same way about everything. How unexciting would that be?
I think it's just a shame that like you like. It's like with any of the Trails games, it maybe except the first, because the first, like, hey, everyone kind of knows it already. Where like we're this far in narratively into the series, and like saying anything about it will piss off some people who want to go through it blind. So, which is fair. I mean, I totally get that, but it's just like it's hard to like express an opinion, but can't elaborate because it's so riddled with other sorts of like narrative baggage.
It's also worth noting that pretty much anyone that's been listening to this podcast for the last several years already knows where the majority of us kind of fall on the more recent games. So it's not going to be really new to them. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but it's cool that Scott, enjoyed it. It's cool that.
All the power to him.
I kind of got the feeling like the West would probably like Daybreak 2 better than like how the Japanese fans received it. But it's okay. It's okay.
I don't know. I feel like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I am planning to play this because it's one of those things where it almost feels like sunk cost fallacy, where I've managed to stay up to date on the English releases, and it's like, oh no, it's out. That means I'm behind. I've tested it or whatever. It's a chore. I gotta play it.
Yeah, I
so I will play it, and then I'll report
back. Bad, but I don't think it's Cold Steel 4 bad. That it just retroactively destroyed all the story before it, right?
Remember, Scott is a fan of Cold Steel 4, so I'm like, well, I mean,
yeah, like I disagree with him on everything. Okay.
Well, it's like I've played bad Trails games and I've played good ones, so like I am open-minded.
There you
Go in
go.
and we'll
Gameplay. I think the
and we'll
gameplay
see
is
and we'll
solid.
see what we get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I think gameplay wise,
So-
it's solid. This game is a lot better. Like from Daybreak 1. If you enjoy the gameplay and don't really care for the story, you could be one of those guys that skip every cutscene and just play for the gameplay. Like this
I
one
wouldn't
YouTube
do
comment I found.
I wouldn't do that, but
yeah, we were showing a YouTube comment of like of a person in a random YouTube comment says, "I played every Trails game. I've skipped every cutscene, every dialogue. I only played for the gameplay. I don't know what the fuck is going on." That was basically the YouTube comment.
Gameplay chats.
I know, man. What a gameplay god, dude. I fucking kneel.
There are those people that exist. I do think in the gameplay front, it is better than Daybreak 1.
I mean, it's like FF14 people who do that. It's like I'm not here to fucking watch the hours of cutscenes and read dialogue. I'm here to.
I'm just here to do raid.
And,
Yeah, there are YouTube creators that do that, and they ask them like, "What's the story?" He's like, "I don't fucking care about the story." Okay, but
that's
all the
great.
power
And-
to them.
And beyond the review, we have two other features up on the site that are kind of correlated. Mikhail again did another portable PC special feature for it, and not a surprise because of PH3 and Durante's work on the PC ports of these games. It's the best place to play this game and runs very well on on Steam Deck and portable PC.
I love when he asked, so how do you get around the fact that there's like Stutter and DirectX 12 titles on PC? And said, well, one way we get around it is we have not released a game with DirectX 12.
There you go.
Yeah, the Ronte interview is incredible. He had so many great responses. He actually provided source code to us in the interview.
I didn't know that.
It was
it was an example about how on Steam Deck, one kind of pain point is if you want save data bonuses, it's actually pretty hard to do that because there's no official way to handle it. So Durante's has his own kind of solution to it, and he's like, here's an example. Other devs, feel free to just steal this because I don't care. We just want this to fucking work. So
yeah, he basically made a custom baked solution to get that working. He had some very pointed things to say about the state of FF7 Rebirth's PC port, which is really funny. I love it. Incredible interview. I highly recommend people to read the interview that Mikhail put up between him and Durante about Daybreak 2 because they go off into a lot of different topics along it. And we also found out that Durante is a 1000 times resist fan.
Oh yeah.
I think that kind of covers us for most of our features. Actually, there is one more here that I might need a little bit of help with because this is not something that I am knowledgeable on. The rock band Health. I don't know anything about this guy. Johnny.
John Famiglietti. I don't really follow Health as well, but I did read the interview. It's once again another interview between that Mikhail did between him and the bassist of Health, which is a industrial noise rock band who previously contributed to Grand Theft Auto 5, Cyberpunk, and then as Mikhail mentioned, also recently New Blood's Ultra Kill. Basically just generally hey, what's the band been up to these days? How did they get in contact with Rockstar and CD Projekt Red about their involvement in just contributing to video game soundtracks? They had a really great conversation about how John himself, how the band how they opened up a Discord, and John was like, why would anyone care? Then their Discord is one of their the primary ways they contact fans. We found out that hey, that John still has a phone line for people to just call in a radio show style sort of thing to just chat and get feedback, communicate with the fans directly. How John got into Ava and how that sort of spiraled into its own thing within the fandom of Health, and of course how this ties back to the site is Health really wants to contribute to an RPG when it comes to the soundtracks and so forth, and saying maybe in the future an RPG will have health tracks in it, and even if it's not unofficially, Health actually reached out to the developers with Signalis to not do an official track in the game, but hey, since they were fans, they wanted to do an official a collaboration, but not an in-game track, so to speak. And their fans generally really So for people who, even if you're not a fan of health or don't really know it, it's just cool to see like how different parts of the industry, like how they became like involved in video games, especially on the soundtrack side, and also just generally like
Like
I've always
how these sort of partnerships come to be.
exactly, yeah, and health is an interesting case where John is not like how the vocalist in bands is usually like the face of the band. Well, John is like the bassist of the band, and he somehow is the face of it. How that came to be. So both killer interviews are from Mikhail. Amazing stuff.
Mhm. Not a lot of news this week, but we'll go into what we do have this week. We have kind of one game announcement here from Noodle Cat Games. This is called Cloudheim, which is a co-op action RPG. So it always makes you think of Monster Hunter-ish. That we got an announcement trailer for, and it kind of shows the crafting, combat. None of it is with UI, which I know we always harp on, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I want to see the resource management. I want to see meters going up and down. But we see like some flashy, not cinematics, but like combat animations, some environmental vistas, things like that. It's kind of got like a cell shaded style. Slated to release this year. And we got a little bit of a snippet of the game from the publisher. It's being self-published. So we got a pretty long kind of press release about what the game is intending to be and things like that. So we have an announcement trailer, all the screenshots, description of the game from the developer, all up on the site. So kind of keeping our
What's
eyes
the
on that
developer
for
name?
later this year. Noodle Cat Games.
Noodle Cat.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yep. So yeah, it looks like a cartoony kind of Monster Hunter Zelda-ish, but
Yeah.
we only have one. We have 90 seconds of footage to go off.
Right.
So, and
The
they say it's
crafting
cooperative, but
system,
and everything they show is like single player though. So how that co-op thing actually manifests, we don't really know yet. I haven't read the press release line by line, so maybe you can glean in there what they're intending it for it to be. But obviously, they'll give more details throughout the year about what their goals are with this project. Oh, and it's slated for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. In terms of trailers for existing games, we talked a little bit about Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma. They had their big gameplay dump either last week or the week before, where they showed combat, they showed story, they showed like the city building kind of aspects, like actually placing buildings in towns and organizing that, which we talked about a little bit there. Here, this trailer is just a character trailer for one of the protagonists. This one is for Subaru, the male protagonist. So I assume we'll get one next week with the other protagonist, Kaguya.
What's sort of interesting about these trailers is it kind of feels like old-fashioned in that these are like Marvelous Japan trailers, and there isn't an English version yet.
Yeah,
it feels like these days usually we got, I guess, besides in a few cases with like trails or whatnot, where like usually it feels like we get the Japanese and English trailers kind of all together, but not here. Just Japanese Marvelous.
Even trails we're getting the same trailers at the same time now.
Yeah, I mean, and because there's the whole Clouded Leopard English, but not actually English. But
or the English marketing for your
but like anything from like Sega, Square Enix, Atlas. But yeah, even Marvelous, we usually get like worldwide languages and updates. It's gonna be a worldwide release, but this is just a Japanese version trailer. So
I forgot. Adam, because you're looking at financials earlier this week for several publishers, and one of them is Marvelous. Did they mention anything of like their expectations for this upcoming factory, or they just factory?
No, not necessarily, because it's the fiscal year starts in April and this comes out in May, so this is actually for next year.
Okay.
In case you were curious, it seems like Magia, however you pronounce it from Marvelous, do you even know which game I'm talking about? Did not do well.
It's a fairy tale.
Yeah, I remember only finding out that game even came out on PC literally like a week before, and that game bombed so poorly on PC. I don't think it even hit like 100 like concurrent players. That's how bad it went.
Oh yeah, that is.
I know the anime is airing, but you know what? You don't play
There's an anime?
Yes, there's an anime that's airing. You do not play any video game that has an anime adaptation.
It feels like the marketing is off because that's what James is learning. It's like, wait a minute.
He doesn't even know that anime existed.
I know this
Yeah.
isn't fair, but there is one person playing Farmagia on Steam right now.
Let's fucking
Only
go.
one. Oh my god.
Farmagia's strongest soldier.
Farmagia's only soldier.
Man, it wasn't a gacha game. You and Wayland kept that game alive.
So I mean, it feels like there's definitely a handful of releases that are not going well, like Farmagia not working out for Marvelous. It seems like Synduality not working out for Bandai Namco. So definitely a few of these recent releases, and obviously, not Marvelous, but Bandai Namco's Unknown 9 Endeavor.
Yeah. And as far as, first of all, what were we talking about? We're talking about Subaru and Marvelous. Let's take a small detour. Sega put out their financials. They basically said Metaphor is selling well. Sonic and Shadow Generations is selling well.
They didn't give numbers, but they said
no.
like they just gave a comment, right? Just
all we know is 2 million for Sonic, 1 million for Metaphor, which we already knew.
Okay.
They already announced those. I think their revenue is higher than expected due to catalog sales, which are basically like, hey, these games aren't new, but people are buying them.
Like, didn't they sell almost 1 million copies of like Persona games in the last like however many months?
Maybe. Yeah, I have to check like their franchise numbers because they put those out in their reports. But basically, they just said broadly that their catalog sales, which are old games, like prior fiscal year games, are selling well, which I imagine Persona, Yakuza, Sonic, I imagine all of those are selling well. However, Sega's like sales numbers and forecasts are down because they had to cancel Football Manager, which is like not in our sphere, but that's a pretty big game.
Yes,
that they just outright
and that's also really ballsy of them too. Like they've been there in their statements, like saying, "Hey, we could have released it in a state, but we feel like we're not really doing our player base right in the state that it's in because of the whole." Like I guess they have to switch. I don't.
I read up on this. People who are more into like the sports games than I am, apparently this version of Football Manager was like going to be a big update in terms of like not just an incremental, roster update, but in terms of like how it runs and what the functions and things like that. Again, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but there was going to be a big update, and they essentially decided. I heard someone, Luke Plunkett from Aftermath, basically say, "Hey, this is actually a good thing." Basically, kind of frame it as taking a year off so that the next version will be even better.
Versus... It's a shocking move of like, hey, they're actually kind of doing.
EA would never.
Considering that's the only like EA game that's doing well, of course they wouldn't.
Yeah. Square Enix put out their Q3 financials. Their HD game section is still making money. Or is once again making money.
Right.
It doesn't always make money. Dragon Quest exceeded expectations. As far as I know, they haven't said anything about Saga or Fantasian or whatever.
We got a small reminder that Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD remake is this year.
Yeah, very small reminder. One of the PR people basically just said, "Hey, it's coming out still." They have not like shown a trailer for that or anything, right? We don't really know what it looks like. I mean, we know it's going to be HD 2D, but
they had the trailer for the HD for Dragon Quest 3, and then like the key art was like, by the way, yeah, and that's all we've gotten really. Like, oh, that's coming too. Neat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, so Dragon Quest exceeded expectations, at least initial expectations. Honestly, the biggest Square Enix story though for their current quarter is like their mobile revenue has like been cut from like in like a third from last year. It's still higher than their HD games revenue, which it has been for a while, but like their mobile money is going in the wrong direction. And I've seen people say like, well, let's wait for Kingdom Hearts Missing Link, which is like the AR mobile game, as well as Final Fantasy XIV mobile game, which is like, is that Nexon?
Well, yeah, that's a different. It's like Hyperlight.
Or like I'm trying to remember who the partner is.
It was like the studio that Itsuno went to, I think.
Oh, okay. Anyways,
yeah.
Regardless of the licensing situation, I'm sure that would reflect in Square Enix's finances somehow. But Square Enix needs a win in their mobile category. Like it is going in the wrong direction. And then right now their MMO subsection is their best, which it has been in a while, and it's up year over year thanks to Dawntrail. We'll see how long that lasts, but right now it's up. So yeah, that's Square Enix. What else? Capcom is doing fine. Capcom is basically like hinging everything on Monster Hunter this quarter, which obviously will be huge.
Sense.
Will be huge. I guess is it going to be huge enough? I think they expect it to be.
Yeah, because Capcom recently announced that they're shutting down our Resident Evil Reverse.
Oh, and some of the multiplayer stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think what else they have. They released Mai for Street Fighter 6.
They have the Onimusha 2 remaster coming.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, but
I'm so hyped for that, but I hope they got the original soundtrack somehow. The original soundtrack is so good.
I don't know if that'll do numbers, but it's cool that they're doing it. They didn't stop at just the first one.
Kite actually posted the financial results for I don't know how you pronounce it. Is it DNA? Dina?
Yeah.
Dina?
Is it?
Dina?
I don't know how. I don't know what the flavorful like. Is it DNA? Dina?
I don't know.
DNA? I don't know.
I guess not pronounce as DNA.
I see their name when I was playing Grand Blue, so it's like a subsidiary.
But we don't normally cover this company too much. But Kite's been doing some coverage of the Pokemon trading card pocket mobile game, and it's like if you look at the charts for their finances, it's like everything just skyrocketed after that game came out, and it's literally like our game revenue is up by 8,000%, and that's not an exaggeration.
No surprising. Like I'm a hypocrite. You've heard me many times talk about how I hate mobile gacha games. Guess who's been playing a certain Pokemon trading card mobile game for the past 3 months every day?
Have you seen the light yet, James?
No.
I mean, look, I mean, it's not a character game. At least it's a card game, but it's still the same principle. It's still the same. Hey, you're gachaing for card booster packs, and they give you like 2 or 3 free per day on that. But you can still pay real money to get more pools.
I've been paying for the premium pass.
Oh, there you go.
No, it's sunk to our level.
You have contributed to DNA's 8,000% increase in revenues.
Yeah.
But hey, if people are having fun and they're spending wisely and not going into debt because of it,
like literally, I just pay for the monthly thing and that's it. I haven't paid for like any of the currency or anything. So,
but I'm sure there are some people doing unhealthy monetary things with that game, no doubt. But that's congrats to DNA for striking gold on that.
Now they're going to get flayed alive next year when it's like, hey, why is your revenue down 50%?
Yeah, I don't know how you keep momentum on that.
And speaking of Square Enix, I know that's not what we ended with. But that's what I'll segue from. The typical update for letter from the producer for the next major patch update for Final Fantasy XIV. 7.2 Seekers of Eternity slated to release in late March of this year. They detailed out what's going to be coming with a new dungeon, new raid, new trial. Basically, instead of reading the press release, like just going over to James, and I assume Chow is also still up to date on Final Fantasy 14. Like, what are the things you're mainly looking forward to for 7.2?
I really am excited for the new field operations. It looks like it's going to be really cool. Phantom jobs sound fucking sick. It's going to be a good time.
Tee that up for us who don't know what a phantom job is.
It's a new thing. What does that mean? So basically, for the existing field operations, which is stuff like Eureka, which was in Stormblood, and Boja, which was in Shadowbringers, there was some sort of additional kind of leveling system in each of those areas to make it so that even though you're max level, even if you have maximum item level, you're having some sort of progression in that new zone, which is kind of separated. This one, now you have like knowledge, which gets you certain abilities, but also you can get phantom jobs. It's like kind of like Final Fantasy V inspired, where it's like you literally get sub jobs that add additional properties to your job that you're playing. For example, if you're playing as warrior, you can have a phantom job as a monk, which can give you like a counter for when you get hit, which is obviously very useful if you're a tank and stuff like that. So it's they've also said that they're toying around with some ideas for more wacky jobs that they could not like have exist in the like proper Final Fantasy 14 framework, like Time Mage. So it's pretty exciting. I don't know how Chow feels about it, but I mean, I was already excited for the field operation, but like after hearing some like final like proper details, it's like, oh man, this is gonna be really good.
I think that'll keep the fan base pretty happy for now. I mean, there's a lot of grievance about over just the 7.0, but I think the recent post patch has been fairly like positive received. So
People have been liking the raids. The most like common complaint has been is that Fru was maybe a bit too easy, and I can sort of see that, but it's also like people fucking hated Top Dude, and like they needed to have an ultimate raid that was closer to like Ukab and T than like DSR and Top.
just kind of like a little bit before DSR, and then because those are like a huge difficulty curve. Like when they first came out, everyone's like, it's like, holy shit, is this even beatable? It's like, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It just took a long time, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's like I've been saying, I wasn't really worried about the state of Dawntrail in the long term. I just thought it was going to take a bit longer than people wanted to finally like get going. And it seems like with 7.2, we're going to finally reach the point where people stop complaining about the expansion not having enough content, because it's not going to be a problem anymore. So that's good. Yeah.
Few other game updates. This is one that kind of fell through the cracks last year. Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes had, as part of their Kickstarter, listed out and detailed kind of like a season pass sort of thing, of 3 DLCs focusing on 3 characters, Marissa, Sign, and then of all people, Marcus, that were all supposed to release like in the August, September, October timeframe last year. And then it didn't happen for development struggles, things like that. And we were wondering, like, when are these going to reappear? Well, the team at Rabbit and Bear have released basically a new updated roadmap. They took the additional development time, and they basically said, here's our new schedule. Chapter of Marissa will be end of February 27th. Chapter of Sign will be March 13th, and Chapter of Marcus, April 3rd. I don't know if there's a lot of excitement around these, but it is one of the things where it's just it was more of a curiosity, like, where did those go? What happened?
I have zero expectations for these. I feel like these are just to satisfy a Kickstarter stretch goal bonuses.
And that's not the first time we've used that sort of language for this game, where it's like, oh, why is there a racing mini game? Because the Kickstarter stretch goal said there would be. It's like I'm sure at some point I'll be morbidly curious to try these, but I don't know. Like the temperature in the room seems pretty tepid. I think they're like $8 a piece, and they're expected to be like.
This is what I'm confused about. They're $8 each, but like according to the review guide that I got, which was a year ago, when the game first came out in April last year, it says outright, and this is public information, I believe, that they expected each of these DLCs to be 1.5 hours. So it's like $8 for less than 2 hours of game. I don't know.
And we try not to do like the dollars per hour, because that's not usually a useful metric, but it's just like these are bite-sized DLCs. These are not expansions. These are not chapters or like new, like this is going to be like a single quest.
No, I don't know if maybe it expanded in scope since then, part of the delay. I don't know. Kind of doubtful.
The details are pretty sparse. Yeah.
But when you're a backer, then it's like, a lot of Kickstarters, like if you're an early backer, then you get all the DLCs.
Yeah, if you're a backer, you should get the DLC for free, but still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think this is gonna like move the needle much, but there it is. It's on its way.
The only new information out of this is like one, obviously their new roadmap that actually has maybe real release dates, depending if they stick with it. And 2, like they gave like at least a brief description of like what each of them are gonna be about. Like Marissa, like finds like an enchanted girl. They have you have to find out the secrets about this secret girl, the child of the rune. The sane one is weird because it's basically finally lets you see events that unfolded in the main story from his perspective, but he went out of the girl, so you can actually see like what went on from his perspective on his side when he decided to defect to Noah's group. And then like the third one is like about Marcus, and it's a Marcus, Carrie, and Noah, and they interact with like a teleportation gateway that acts as a way to learn more about Marcus's past. And it's like, oh, okay.
I mean, like Marcus
Yes.
seemed like a fine character.
Marcus is
All
like a
right.
silly undead necromancer. Like, okay.
I don't know if I needed any of these, but okay.
Yeah,
Well,
well, I guess
maybe they're fucking like 90 minutes of like the best shit ever, and it's worth the price tag. Okay, maybe it's like all masterpieces. We don't know.
This one is more of a little bit of a business update. We talked very briefly, I believe it was on a podcast like middle of last year. Wolfeye Studios. This is like a immersive sim Western RPG studio founded on, I believe, X Arcane. Developers. They made Weird West was their debut title. They announced that they're making like a retro futuristic first person RPG. Didn't announce a title. Just kind of gave some general concept art. That's what they're working on. Well, that they have a publisher partner for that RPG now. NEOWIZ is going to be their publishing partner. They also released some new concept art, and it looks very similar, at least in vibe, to that Clockwork Revolution from In Exile. At least the same sort of. And again, I'm basing this off general concept art. For both games, we've not seen a whole lot.
It's
so
really
I might
fascinating that it's NeoWiz partnering with them, because aren't they a Korean studio?
Yep.
Yeah, but the most recent significant thing they published was like Lies of P, I believe.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically, a little bit more business focused. But the studio is working on their second title, and it's first person, RPG, which might be more up their alley, because that's where a lot of their studio talent came from Arcane. And obviously, any RPGs that are in first person with like immersive sim-ish elements, I'm always that's basically my vibe. So I'm excited for this, but of course, it's so early. This is more of a business announcement than anything, though they did provide a little bit of a concept art. I believe I have the Gamatsu post here. I believe they've stated that they want to have like an alpha or something in 2025. Oh, maybe that was from the original announcement. Yeah, some August of last year, they're planning to try to hit a limited private alpha this year for their game. So I don't know if that's still in the cards, but that's kind of what they previously teed up as kind of their schedule. So we'll see if that comes to be. And even though Weird West I was lukewarm on, I am excited about the idea at the very least. One more sales update. I know Adam just kind of gave a little bit of a sales update for a lot of different publishers. Nintendo, their Q3 results. Mario and Luigi Brothership sold 1.8 million copies. So I think anything with Mario and Luigi in the title in any form is going to sell cool mill.
Cool mill.
I don't know what they expect. Well, I remember Adam was
Super Mario Odyssey has sold 1 million units this year. I mean, and that's probably close to full price still, right? Because it doesn't go on sale.
That's what they do. They just sell a cool mill without even trying. But yeah, Mario and Luigi seems like it did pretty well. Obviously, you don't really know what their expectations were: 1.5, 2 million, 2.5. But it sold 1.8. Respectable. A few dates. Tribe 9. This is the mobile Akatsuki Games free to play game. Is this the one that has like the special wacky baseball gameplay mechanic to it?
Dream baseball.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even the like the thumbnail for this announcement, it's going to be releasing on February 20th for both mobile devices and Steam on the 20th. And even like the thumbnail for this is the character, I don't remember his name, holding like an electronic bat over home plate.
Yeah.
So,
And then
the baseball is at the core of the theming here.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Free to play game, you do gacha for characters. Apparently they'll make the gameplay not as ass as the previous beta that they showed off in like the recent Steam Next Fest demo. Like that felt really bad to play. And apparently they're making a lot of adjustments to it to not make it bad. I don't know if I'm gonna give it another try, man. I'm like, I didn't like that demo, and I'm like, well, am I dumb enough to fall for it again? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. It's so weird. I don't know if I like it.
Just that one meme where it's like fell for it again.
Yep, that's me. Give me all the. That's me playing any gacha game. Fell for it again award whenever I try a new gacha game.
And I'm gonna read this again, just because to help keep it in my head of what this game is. It's the year 20XX. Neo Tokyo is under the iron rule of mysterious masked man, who has declared that all affairs have to be settled through his invention, Extreme Games. A young group of rebels forms a resistance, armed with technique and gear inspired by their beloved Extreme Baseball. They join forces to reclaim their stolen dreams. So basically, weaponizing
with baseball.
If the whole game was just absolutely just Extreme Baseball and none of the actual the generic action gameplay, then maybe we're onto something. They just if they just fully committed to the baseball.
Just make it like that fucking like Neo Geo arcade game where it's like the like 2042 baseball, whatever it was.
Oh yeah. Okay, maybe we're onto something.
James, you actually play that?
Yeah.
Jeez.
What? I mean,
sounds like what? You play old games?
It's like he actually knows something from the Neo Geo days. Wow. Considering he's the Metal Slug expert, I guess it was no surprise.
I mean, yeah, there was like a Neo Geo cab at the pizza place I went to when I was in like elementary school. So I played a bunch of stuff there. Did I ever mention on the podcast that once I was able to one credit clear Metal Slug 3?
You did.
That's the hardest one.
Yeah, that's really good though. Fuck.
Yeah.
Hard
Fuck the boss of the fourth stage. That's the one that like makes or breaks if you're gonna one credit clear that game, because it's like, here's my fuck off mouth laser, like pixel perfect jump over it.
It looks like flying ghost wolves blowing up.
Thanks for playing. Insert another quarter.
Exactly.
There's also another game releasing on February 20th. This is not a game we've talked about before. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's either Cabernet, or if it's French, Cabernet. I don't know if it's Cabernet or not. It is okay. My default is to assume it's French, but I don't know for sure. So like, all right, Cabernet. This is kind of a narrative RPG. So my direct point of comparison is something like Pentiment, though I've not played many of that style of games. So I'm sure there's probably a better direct comparison. But like a period piece, it's set in 19th century Eastern Europe. You play as a young doctor who is also a vampire, and it shows like mini games, point and click, managing relationships, having a basic set of abilities around having your vampire aspects to you or whatever.
There are stats for music and art, literature and writing, science and logic, and history and politics.
Sorry, and just hearing like a vampire, it's also a doctor. All I'm thinking of is this doctor. The only thing he tells you to do is we're going to have to take some of your blood. Don't worry about it.
Yep. And there is a demo available on. Oh, this is releasing on everything. So Xbox, Switch, Xbox One, even PlayStation 4 and 5. But it does have a demo available on Steam that will have carryover. So if you want to at least get a feel for it, there is that demo available there. But it seems like a fun narrative adventure if you are a fan of the time period or vampires or both. Chernobylite 2 Exclusion Zone. We talked about how they were planning to release in Steam Early Access. We talked about the reintroduction of the first-person mode, so that it has both perspectives. It'll be releasing in Steam Early Access on March 6th.
It's man, the timetable for this game is like crazy, because like, okay, we finally wrapped up our successful Kickstarter campaign. Okay, we're ready to go early access like next month. It feels like
everything seems upside down. They announced the game, then they announced the Kickstarter. Kickstarter successful. They reintroduced what basically the gameplay perspective of the original game. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Early access next month. It's like, oh, okay, like they're working fast.
Yeah, that's wow.
And then lastly, Dungeons of Hinterberg. This is a game that Josh covered for us last year. Will be hitting PlayStation devices on March 13th. It debuted on Xbox Game Pass, and PC last year in the summer in July. So getting ported to PlayStation 4 and 5.
There's a new secret bonus episode in this release, but that's all they said. It's a secret bonus episode.
Astrobot will be found in a dungeon. You'll save them.
Yeah, it's a cool game. People who just want like a pretty relaxing game that has pretty neat dungeon designs and layouts and mechanics.
Is there any big release coming out soon? I was just thinking because just the PlayStation Network's completely down. Like, imagine Monster Hunter came out and the network is down.
I mean, the Monster Hunter beta
is it still down?
Yeah.
I knew it was down. I know it's still down.
Yeah, it's been down for like maybe over 15 hours now, and then there's been reports where it's like it's slowly coming back up, and then people are like, no, it's definitely not back up. So it's still unstable, at least at the moment we're recording here. But to provide context, like I guess all of a sudden, like sometime yesterday, the PlayStation Network went down. Sony was like, we have no ETA when it's coming back up, and in between when it came down and in between and now they have not provided like an update of like why it went down or like any sort of like in between like that 12 to 14 hour time frame where it was down. There was like no updates at all on like what's happening, is there any progress, etc. It's like it's a failure of like just modern communication with your audience, especially because it's the weekend and a lot of people play multiplayer games on PlayStation.
Not just like there's it's causing some issues for reviewers too, is all I'll say.
Oh yeah, I imagine. Oh yeah, because there's definitely like you have to you need like the online element of PlayStation Network being able to verify licenses to play your games even. So it's just like it's fucked up in a lot of ways, and especially because like PlayStation Plus as a service for many years now, you've needed to pay for it to play.
Also, they keep raising the price. They just announced they're going to be getting rid of fucking PS4 titles. It's like, put the price back down to $60, you assholes.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like, Sony has a lot to answer for regarding the situation. We'll see if they do. And if not, then it's like how many years since that big Sony outage on?
I think that was like 2011. Was it?
Maybe, yeah, it was a long time ago.
14 years ago.
I remember saying something like 13, 14 year anniversary, and like, damn.
Jesus.
Yep.
So yeah, hopefully they haven't said if any sensitive data has been accessed. Hopefully not. Hopefully it's not a redo of that situation, that fuckfest. But it's just we'll if they clarify and they give any new details, I'm sure we'll touch base upon it next on what happened.
And that kind of covers us for this week. Next week, obviously, we'll be able to talk about Avowed. There's a few other games that I'm not sure if the embargo will lift or not at that time. Obviously, the back half of February is pretty packed, so we'll have plenty to talk about. Obviously, Daybreak will release, so join our Discord, discord.gg/RPG site if you're planning to play that or any of the other upcoming, the Monster Hunter, the next beta, or the full release coming out, or you're still playing Kingdom Come or whatever. Join our Discord, join the discussion there. You can find RPG Site on all the social media networks. Just search for RPG Space Site. You should be able to find us. However you listen to this podcast, leave us a like, leave us a rating, leave us a comment, even if it's a comment that says you skip all Trails cutscenes. We don't judge. We like to see those. Thank you all so much for listening, and we like to see the comments and the ratings for all that do make it to these long episodes that we somehow manage to hold pretty much every week throughout the year. A lot of exciting RPGs coming up. I know a lot of us are going to be digging into Kingdom Come eventually. Obviously, big games coming out in March as well. It's no quieter than February. So exciting front half of the year for us, and it's not going to slow down. But thank you all so much for listening. Until you hear from us next time, stay safe, take care. Talk to y'all later.
I kneel to gameplay gods and goddesses. They're truly powerful.